The late afternoon sun cast golden streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Sovereign Grand Hotel's lobby, illuminating the Italian marble floors that had been polished to mirror perfection by hands like Tamara Williams. She pushed her cleaning cart past a cluster of businessmen in $5,000 suits, their laughter echoing off the vaulted ceilings as they sipped $300 bottles of champagne. None of them looked at her. To them, she was invisible, just another black woman in a gray uniform with a name tag, existing solely to refresh their towels and replace their Egyptian cotton sheets. What they didn't know could fill the penthouse suites stacked 20 floors above their heads. Tamara had been working at the Sovereign for 6 months now, ever since her grandfather's lawyer had appeared at her one-bedroom apartment in Bronzeville with documents that changed everything. 67% ownership, $4.2 billion in assets, a hotel empire spanning 18 properties across 3 continents. All inherited from a grandfather she'd met only twice, a man who'd built his fortune from nothing and left it to the granddaughter who reminded him of himself. But Tamara wasn't ready to claim her throne. Not yet. She needed to understand every floor, every system, every person who made the Sovereign run before she revealed herself as their boss. If you believe that justice finds everyone eventually, no matter how rich or powerful they think they are, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is about to prove that karma keeps receipts. The service elevator dinged as Tamara reached the 20th floor, home to the presidential suites where rooms started at $8,000 per night. She checked her assignment sheet. Suite 2047, occupied by Sheikh Rashid Al Mansour, an oil magnate whose net worth made him untouchable in 43 countries. She knocked twice, used her master key. Housekeeping. The suite appeared empty. She began her routine, replacing towels, checking toiletries, straightening magazines on the glass coffee table. That's when she heard it. A child's voice, bright and musical, singing. "Zuri?" Her daughter emerged from behind the bedroom door, her yellow dress bright against the suite's cream walls. At 6 years old, Zuri Williams was all curiosity and fearlessness. Her braids with their colorful beads clicked softly as she bounced on her light-up sneakers, her unicorn backpack strapped to her small shoulders. "Mommy! I came to surprise you. Mrs. Chen said I could come up after school." Tamara's heart hammered. "Baby! You can't be here! We have to—" The suite's main door burst open. Sheikh Rashid Al Mansour filled the doorway like a storm cloud. 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with rings worth more than most people's houses glittering on his fingers. The Patek Philippe on his wrist could have paid Tamara's student loans 3 times over. His eyes landed on Tamara, then dropped to Zuri. Everything changed. "What is that doing in my suite?" Not who. That. "I apologize, Mr. Al Mansour. My daughter didn't mean to. We're leaving right now." "Your daughter?" His lip curled. "You brought your child into my private space? Do you people have no concept of boundaries? You people." The words hit like physical blows. "Upset?" His voice rose to a roar. "I pay $8,000 per night and you contaminate my space with this?" His hand shot out, fingers closing around Zuri's small arm like a vice. Zuri's scream pierced the air, high, terrified. Sheikh Rashid hauled her toward him, his grip leaving red marks on her brown skin. "People like you don't belong in places like this. Your mother should have taught you to know your place." "Let go of my baby!" Tamara lunged forward. "She's 6 years old." His other hand came up fast. The slap echoed like a gunshot. Zuri's head snapped to the side. Blood immediately began streaming from her nose, bright red against her yellow dress, dripping onto the Persian rug. Tamara threw herself at Sheikh Rashid, her fists pounding against his chest. "Get your hands off her!" He released Zuri with a contemptuous shove. The little girl collapsed against the wall, sobbing, blood flowing freely. Then he turned to Tamara. "You dare raise your hands to me? You, a maid, you think you can touch me?" His palm connected with Tamara's face with enough force to snap her head back. The diamond rings cut into her cheekbone, opening gashes. Before she could recover, he grabbed her shoulders and slammed her against the marble wall. The impact drove the air from her lungs. Stars exploded across her vision. She felt ribs crack, the pain radiating like fire. You people think you can go anywhere, but there are still consequences for those who forget their station. He slammed her again, and again. Blood dripped down her neck, staining her uniform. Through the pain, she could see Zuri crying for her mother. Please, she's just a child. A child? He laughed. Is that what you people call these little animals you breed? Contaminating everything they touch? His assistant Khalid appeared in the doorway, expression carefully neutral. Sir, perhaps we should call hotel security. Yes, call the police. I want this woman arrested. I want her to learn that there are consequences when people like her forget their place. His wife Farah glided in, wrapped in a Hermes hijab. She glanced at the bleeding woman, the crying child, the blood. Her expression remained smooth. Rashid, darling, is everything all right? Simply dealing with some vermin that infiltrated our accommodations. Vermin. Through the open door, other guests gathered. A white woman clutched her purse tighter. An elderly couple stepped back. A businessman pulled his daughter behind him. Not one intervened. Sheikh Rashid smiled at his audience. Let this be a lesson. There are still standards. Still consequences for those who overstep. Several people nodded. One man applauded. Tamara pulled Zuri close, blood from both their faces mingling. Shh, baby. Mommy's got you. She could hear the elevator arriving, heavy footsteps approaching. Marcus Bear Thompson filled the entrance. 6'3", 250 pounds of muscle, his security uniform stretched tight. But it was his eyes that carried real danger. Brown eyes that had seen combat, that had zero tolerance for bullies who hurt children. He'd been monitoring cameras when the call came. Suite 2047. Disturbance. When he'd heard the child's screams through his radio, "Please don't hurt my mommy," something primal awakened. Now he took in the scene. Woman bleeding, child bleeding, terrorized, blood on marble. The rage that filled Marcus Thompson was cold, calculated. Step away from them. Right now. Sheikh Rashid spun around. You dare give me orders? I am Sheikh Rashid Al-Mansour. I could buy and sell you 1,000 times. Marcus's hand moved to his radio. But he didn't call hotel security. He keyed a different frequency. Bear to all Iron Brotherhood units. Code Black. The Sovereign Grand 20th floor. Suite 2047. Child assaulted. Mother beaten. 6-year-old bleeding. Full club response. Now. Static crackled. Falcon responding. ETA 7 minutes. Spike responding. Rolling with 8 units. Chains responding. 4 blocks out. Ghost responding. Bringing the squad. Hammer here. On my way. Wolf responding. I can see the hotel. Thunder responding. Lock it down. Sheikh Rashid's expression shifted. What is this? Who are you calling? The sound started as distant rumble, but it grew. The deep, throaty roar of motorcycle engines, dozens, converging from every direction. Harleys and choppers, each piloted by a member of the Iron Brotherhood MC. Within 8 minutes, 42 motorcycles surrounded the Sovereign Grand Hotel. They lined Michigan Avenue in formation, engines rumbling like war drums. Their riders, men forged in military service, dismounted in synchronized precision. Each wore leather vests with patches, a bear's head roaring. The words Iron Brotherhood MC arched above. Hotel guests pressed against windows, staring at the army of bikers filing through golden revolving doors. The club didn't need to announce themselves. 42 men, most veterans, all brothers. Every single one, black men who'd learned the system wouldn't protect people who looked like them. If this moment resonated with you, hit subscribe and like. because what happens next will restore your faith that brotherhood still means something. Jake Falcon Morrison led the first wave into the service elevator, 6'1", former Marine sniper. Tyrone Spike Davis came next, Sergeant of Arms, 6'4", former boxer. Darius Chains Robinson followed, burn-scarred face from Fallujah. Xavier Ghost Harris, former SWAT. Isaiah Hammer Walker. DeAndre Wolf Johnson and Malik Thunder Allen completed the squad. 7 giants in leather stepped into the hallway. Sheikh Rashid stood in the doorway, his face draining of color as they approached. Behind him, Khalid had gone pale. Farah's smooth expression cracked into fear. Marcus stepped aside, letting his brothers enter. They formed a semicircle around Sheikh Rashid, not threatening, just present, just impossible to ignore. Falcon moved to Tamara and Zuri, kneeling beside them. "Ma'am, let me help you." "Don't you touch her," Sheikh Rashid roared. "I am calling the police." "My lawyers, you have no right." "We have every right," Spike said, his voice rumbling. "That's a child you put your hands on, a mother you beat." "Do you know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are," Ghost said quietly. "The question is, do you know who they are?" A new voice cut through the suite. "Sheikh Al-Mansour, I'm going to need you to stop talking." Every head turned. A man in an immaculate 3-piece suit stood in the doorway. James Wellington, attorney from Morrison and Associates. He held a leather briefcase. "And who the hell are you?" Sheikh Rashid demanded. Wellington smiled. It wasn't pleasant. "I'm the attorney for the owner of this hotel. You've just committed multiple felonies against said owner." Silence. "What are you talking about?" Wellington opened his briefcase, removed a document. "The Sovereign Grand Hotel is owned by TW Holdings LLC. 67% is owned by—" He looked up, eyes finding Tamara. "Ms. Tamara Williams." The words hung like smoke after an explosion. Sheikh Rashid's face went from red to white to gray. "That's impossible. She's a maid." "She's your boss," Wellington corrected, "and you just assaulted her and her 6-year-old daughter in a hotel she owns." 23 years. Tamara had spent 23 years learning what it meant to be underestimated. Growing up in Bronzeville, the daughter of a nurse and a bus driver, she'd watched her parents work doubles and triples to keep their family afloat. Her grandfather, her mother's father, had disappeared when her mother was young, leaving behind only stories of a man who'd made something of himself somewhere far away. She'd never imagined those stories were true. The lawyer had appeared 6 months ago with documents that seemed impossible. Her grandfather, Thomas Williams, had built an empire from a single boarding house in the 1960s. He'd faced discrimination at every turn, banks refusing loans, investors slamming doors, competitors trying to run him out of business. But he'd persisted, buying properties one at a time, reinvesting every dollar, building slowly and carefully until he owned 18 hotels across 3 continents. He'd never reached out to his daughter. The shame of abandoning her had been too great. But when he died at 91, his will had been crystal clear. Everything went to his granddaughter Tamara, the one who reminded him most of himself, the one who'd put herself through community college working 3 jobs, the one who'd kept going after her husband died in a car accident, raising Zuri alone while studying for her hotel management degree at night. Thomas Williams had watched from afar for years, and in the end, he'd given her everything. But Tamara wasn't stupid. She knew that walking into a boardroom and announcing herself as the owner would be met with lawsuits, challenges, questions about her competency. So she'd gone undercover, learning the business from the ground up, documenting everything, preparing for the day she'd reveal herself. She just hadn't expected that day to come like this. In the 48 hours following the assault, everything moved with the precision of dominoes falling. The Iron Brotherhood had refused to leave the hotel until Tamara and Zuri were treated by paramedics. The bikers had formed a protective circle around mother and daughter as EMTs examined them. Zuri's broken nose, Tamara's 3 cracked ribs, facial lacerations requiring 17 stitches, severe bruising across her back and shoulders. Sheikh Rashid had demanded they leave, had threatened lawsuits, had called the police himself. That had been his second mistake. His first was touching Tamara. His second was calling the authorities when he was the one who'd committed the crimes. Chicago PD had arrived to find 42 bikers standing guard over a bleeding woman and child and a billionaire screaming about trespassing. But when Captain Kenneth Foster reviewed the security footage that Marcus had immediately secured and backed up to 3 separate servers, everything changed. The video was damning. Crystal clear 4K resolution showing Sheikh Rashid grabbing a 6-year-old child, slapping her hard enough to break her nose, then beating her mother against a marble wall while she begged him to stop. The audio captured every word, every racial slur, every "you people," every "animals," every "know your place." Within an hour, Sheikh Rashid Al-Mansour was in handcuffs. His protests about diplomatic immunity died when the State Department confirmed he had no such protection. His demands to call his lawyers were granted, but his lawyers took one look at the video and quietly suggested he prepare for the worst. His wife, Farah, had boarded a private jet back to Dubai within 6 hours, taking their children and as many liquid assets as she could carry. The charges came swift and severe: assault and battery of a minor, aggravated assault and battery of an adult, hate crime enhancements on both counts due to the racial nature of his attack, unlawful restraint, making terroristic threats. And because this had happened in a hotel engaged in interstate commerce, the FBI added federal charges: deprivation of rights under color of law, federal hate crimes, assault in a special maritime and territorial jurisdiction. Sheikh Rashid Al-Mansour, a man worth $4.3 billion, sat in Cook County Jail on $10 million bond he refused to post out of principle, certain this would all be dismissed within days. He was wrong. The media explosion was instantaneous. Security footage, leaked anonymously but strategically, went viral within 3 hours. 42 million views in the first day, 85 million by day 3. The hashtags #JusticeForZuri and #TamaraWilliams trended globally for a week, but it was the revelation of Tamara's true identity that turned the story nuclear. When James Wellington held a press conference 72 hours after the assault, reporters packed the room expecting a standard victim advocacy statement. What they got instead rewrote the narrative completely. "Miss Tamara Williams is not simply a victim of assault," Wellington announced, his voice carrying the weight of courtrooms and consequences. "She is the majority owner of the Sovereign Grand Hotel, where this attack occurred. Sheikh Al-Mansour did not assault a maid. He assaulted his boss. He assaulted the woman who owned the ground beneath his feet. And he will face every consequence our legal system can deliver." The press room erupted. The investigation that followed revealed a pattern that made prosecutors salivate. Sheikh Rashid had a history: complaints from staff at luxury hotels across 3 continents. Maids harassed, bellhops assaulted, service workers humiliated. Most had been paid off, some had been threatened, all had been silenced, until now. Federal prosecutors brought in Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Morrison, a 34-year-old black woman who'd made her career prosecuting hate crimes. She reviewed the evidence with the cold precision of a surgeon planning an operation. "We're going to make an example," she told Tamara during their first meeting. "Not because of who you are, but because of what he did. Because of every person like you who's been treated as less than human by people like him. This ends now." The trial was set for 8 weeks out. Federal Court, downtown Chicago, Judge Patricia Sterling presiding. The courtroom on the first day of trial was packed beyond capacity. Media from 6 countries, representatives from hospitality workers' unions, members of the Iron Brotherhood, 42 strong, sitting in the back rows in their leather vests, silent and watching, and Tamara sitting at the prosecution table, Zuri beside her holding her mother's hand, both of them wearing their scars like armor. Sheikh Rashid entered in an expensive suit, his legal team flanking him, 6 attorneys from the most prestigious firm in Chicago, each billing $1,200 per hour. His expression was one of barely contained rage mixed with absolute certainty that his money would prevail. Judge Sterling, a 61-year-old black woman who'd spent 30 years on the bench, looked at him with eyes that had seen too many men like him walk free. "Mr. Al-Mansour," she said, her voice carrying absolute authority, "you stand accused of heinous crimes against a woman and child. This court will hear evidence and justice will be served. Do you understand?" His lawyer answered, "Yes, Your Honor." The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Rebecca Morrison began with the security footage, playing it on screens throughout the courtroom. The jury, 8 women, 4 men, diverse in age and race, watched in horror as Sheikh Rashid grabbed Zuri, slapped her, beat her mother. Several jurors wiped tears. One woman covered her mouth. Morrison let the video speak for itself, then called her first witness. The prosecution calls Dr. Sarah Mitchell, pediatric emergency physician. Dr. Mitchell, a white woman in her 50s, took the stand with the gravity of someone who'd seen too many hurt children. She described Zuri's injuries in clinical detail: nasal fracture requiring surgical correction, soft tissue damage to her arm from being grabbed, psychological trauma consistent with acute stress disorder. "In your professional opinion, Dr. Mitchell, was this an accident?" "Absolutely not. The force required to break a 6-year-old's nose is significant. This was intentional violence against a small child who couldn't defend herself." The defense tried to cross-examine, suggesting Zuri might have injured herself falling. Dr. Mitchell destroyed them with medical evidence. Next came Dr. James Rodriguez, who'd treated Tamara. 3 cracked ribs, 17 stitches for facial lacerations, severe contusions across her spine, concussion, injuries consistent with being repeatedly slammed against a hard surface. Could these injuries have been sustained accidentally? No. The pattern indicates sustained, deliberate violence. Someone beat this woman with intent to cause serious harm. Marcus Thompson took the stand next, still in his security uniform. He described hearing Zuri's screams, finding mother and daughter bleeding, calling his club because he knew backup would be needed to protect them. "Why did you call your motorcycle club instead of hotel security?" "Because I'd seen men like Sheikh Al-Mansour before. Men who think money makes them untouchable. Men who hurt people and walk away. I needed brothers I could trust to make sure that didn't happen. I needed witnesses who wouldn't be intimidated or bought off." The defense tried to paint the Iron Brotherhood as a gang, as intimidation. Marcus didn't flinch. "We're veterans. Most of us served our country. We protect our community when the system fails. That's what we did that day." Then came the other hotel staff. Maids from 3 different luxury hotels testified about Sheikh Rashid's pattern of behavior. A housekeeper from Paris described being grabbed and propositioned. A bellhop from London recounted racial slurs and being spat on. A concierge from Dubai spoke through tears about being assaulted when she refused his advances. The pattern was clear. Sheikh Rashid Al-Mansour believed his money gave him the right to abuse anyone he considered beneath him. On day 3, Tamara took the stand. She wore a simple navy suit. Her face still showed fading bruises. She held her head high as she was sworn in, her voice steady as she began her testimony. Rebecca Morrison walked her through it gently. The surprise visit from her daughter, the fear when Sheikh Rashid entered, the horror of watching him hit Zuri, the pain of being beaten while her child screamed. "Ms. Williams, did you know at the time that you owned this hotel?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell him?" "Because in that moment it shouldn't have mattered. I could have been a maid, a janitor, anyone. No one deserves to be beaten. No child deserves to be hit. My ownership didn't make his actions wrong. His actions were wrong regardless of who I was." The courtroom was silent. The defense cross-examination was brutal. They tried to suggest she'd set him up, that she'd sent her daughter in deliberately. that this was all a scheme to extort money. Tamara remained calm. My daughter is 6 years old. She wanted to surprise her mother at work. That's not a crime. What Sheikh Al-Mansour did to her, that's the crime. On day 4, the defense rested without calling Sheikh Rashid to testify. His lawyers knew the video made any testimony suicidal. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Sheikh Rashid Al-Mansour stood as Judge Sterling prepared to deliver his sentence, his face finally showing fear. Mr. Al-Mansour, you have been convicted by a jury of your peers of heinous crimes. You assaulted a 6-year-old child. You brutalized her mother. You did these things because you believed your wealth placed you above the law, above common decency, above basic humanity. You were wrong. Judge Sterling paused, her eyes hard. For the assault on Zuri Williams, I sentence you to 5 years in federal prison. For the assault on Tamara Williams, I sentence you to 7 years to run consecutively. For the hate crime enhancements, I add an additional 3 years, 15 years total. Sheikh Rashid swayed, his lawyers catching him. Furthermore, you are ordered to pay $5 million in compensatory damages and $20 million in punitive damages to your victims. You are permanently banned from entering the United States after serving your sentence, and I am recommending your assets be reviewed for civil forfeiture due to your pattern of using wealth to silence victims. Justice was served. If this moment moved you, hit subscribe, like, and comment. Did he get what he deserved? The transformation happened overnight, but its effects would ripple for generations. The morning after Sheikh Rashid Al-Mansour was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, Tamara Williams walked through the front entrance of the Sovereign Grand Hotel. Not through the service entrance, not in a gray uniform, but through the golden revolving doors in a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than a month of her old salary. The staff in the lobby froze. Some recognized her immediately. Others took a moment, their brains struggling to reconcile the woman they'd known as a maid with the woman now striding across the marble with the confidence of ownership. Linda Chen, the front desk manager who'd let Zuri come upstairs that fateful day, started crying the moment she saw Tamara. "I'm so sorry," Linda whispered. "I never should have let her go up alone." "I never—" Tamara pulled her into a hug. "You gave a child permission to visit her mother. You did nothing wrong, none of this was your fault. But it was Gerald Peterson, the head of security who'd initially sided with procedure over justice, who approached with genuine remorse. Ms. Williams, I need to resign. I failed you. I failed Zuri. I should have—" "You should stay," Tamara interrupted, "because you learned something that day. And I need people who can learn, who can grow, who can do better. That's worth more than perfection." Within 2 weeks, Tamara had convened a meeting of all 18 hotel general managers across her grandfather's empire. She stood at the head of the conference table in the Chicago headquarters, the building her grandfather had purchased in 1987, and laid out her vision. "My grandfather built this empire one property at a time, facing discrimination at every turn. He never forgot where he came from, and neither will I. Effective immediately, we're implementing new policies across all properties. The changes were revolutionary for the luxury hospitality industry. $15 minimum wage, rising to $20 within 2 years. Full health care benefits for all staff, including part-time workers. Paid family leave. Tuition reimbursement for employees pursuing degrees. A zero-tolerance policy for guest abuse of staff, enforced not with quiet payoffs but with immediate ejection and permanent blacklisting. If a guest can't treat our staff with basic human dignity, Tamara announced, their money isn't welcome here. The industry predicted disaster. Luxury guests would flee, profits would collapse. The hotels would fail within a year. They were wrong. Within 6 months, the sovereign properties became the most sought-after employers in their respective cities. Staff turnover dropped from 43% to 8%. Service quality soared. Guest satisfaction reached record highs. And a funny thing happened. When staff felt valued, they provided service that no amount of fear or desperation could match. Revenue increased by 17% in the first year. The Iron Brotherhood became permanent fixtures at the Sovereign Grand Chicago. Marcus Bear Thompson was promoted to Director of Security, overseeing safety protocols across all North American properties. He hired 6 of his brothers to staff security, veterans who understood that protection meant everyone, regardless of their position or paycheck. Falcon ran executive protection. Spike trained all security personnel in de-escalation and proper use of force. Ghost implemented surveillance systems that couldn't be bypassed or deleted. Hammer supervised facility maintenance, ensuring everything from motorcycles in the parking garage to the equipment that kept the hotel running was in perfect condition. The hotel's garage became an unofficial Iron Brotherhood clubhouse, with designated parking for the brothers' motorcycles. Guests loved it. The presence of the leather-clad veterans made them feel safer, and the brothers loved having legitimate work that paid well and honored their skills. Zuri's recovery took longer than her mother's physical wounds. The broken nose healed in 6 weeks, the bruises faded in a month, but the nightmares lasted for over a year. She started therapy the week after the assault. Dr. Patricia Morrison, no relation to the prosecutor, specialized in childhood trauma. She used art therapy, play therapy, and cognitive behavioral techniques to help Zuri process what had happened. The breakthrough came when Zuri drew a picture of herself as a superhero, standing between her mother and the bad man. In her drawing, she wore a cape made of her mother's uniform and was surrounded by men in leather vests with motorcycles. "I wasn't strong enough to stop him," Zuri told Dr. Morrison, her 6-year-old voice small but determined. "But I will be. Mommy says I can be anything, so I'm going to be strong enough to protect people like Uncle Bear protects us." The Iron Brotherhood adopted Zuri as their collective niece. Every Sunday, weather permitting, the brothers would arrive at Tamara's new penthouse. She'd sold the Bronzeville apartment and moved into the hotel's owner's residence on the 30th floor. For breakfast, they'd bring gifts, books about strong women, toy motorcycles, helmets sized for kids. Falcon taught her chess. Spike showed her basic self-defense moves modified for children. Ghost read her stories about brave girls. Hammer let her help fix motorcycles, mostly by handing him tools and asking endless questions. Wolf and Thunder played elaborate games of make-believe where Zuri was always the hero. Bear became her godfather officially, in a ceremony at their church where 42 bikers showed up in suits and ties, their leather vests carefully folded and left on their motorcycles out of respect for the sacred space. "You're my family," Zuri told them during the reception, her voice carrying to every corner of the church hall. "Not because of blood, because you showed up when we needed you. That's what family does." There wasn't a dry eye in the building. 3 years passed, then 5, then 7. Sheikh Rashid Al-Mansour served every day of his 15-year sentence in federal prison. His wife divorced him after 2 years, taking custody of their children and half of his remaining assets. His business partners dissolved their partnerships, unwilling to be associated with a convicted violent offender. Hotels where he'd been a preferred guest banned him permanently. Airlines refused his business. Even his home country quietly made it clear he was no longer welcome in certain circles. He was released on a Tuesday morning in October, thinner, grayer, broken in ways that had nothing to do with his body. Immigration officials were waiting. He was escorted directly to a plane bound for Dubai, with explicit instructions that his visa to return to the United States was revoked permanently. The man who'd once believed his wealth made him untouchable learned that some consequences couldn't be bought off. Tamara never spoke his name again. She refused interviews about the assault, declined to write the tell-all book that publishers offered millions for, and shut down any suggestion that her success was because of what happened rather than in spite of it. "I'm not defined by what he did to me," she told Fortune magazine when they named her Business Person of the Year. "I'm defined by what I built afterward." And build she did. The hotel empire expanded to 23 properties. She launched a foundation providing scholarships to hospitality workers pursuing education. She created a national database where service workers could report abusive guests, protecting staff at hotels across the country. She became a voice for labor rights, speaking at conferences and congressional hearings about the dignity of service work. Zuri grew into a fierce 13-year-old who volunteered at the Iron Brotherhood's youth outreach program, teaching younger kids self-defense and confidence. She wore her scars, a slight bump on her nose where it had been broken, not with shame, but as a reminder that surviving trauma didn't make you a victim. It made you a survivor. On the 10-year anniversary of the assault, Tamara and Zuri returned to Suite 2047, the room where everything had changed. It had been completely renovated, the marble replaced, the furniture changed. Every trace of that day erased from the physical space. But the memory remained. "Are you okay being here?" Tamara asked her daughter, now 16 and nearly as tall as her mother. Zuri looked around the suite, her expression thoughtful. "This is where I learned that the world can be cruel. But it's also where I learned that there are people who will stand up for you. Uncle Bear and his brothers, Mr. Wellington, Judge Sterling, you. This room doesn't scare me anymore. It reminds me that justice is possible." She walked to the window, looking out at Chicago's skyline, at the city where her mother had built an empire, where a community of bikers had become family, where a 6-year-old's scream had sparked a movement for dignity and respect. "You know what I want to do, Mom? When I grow up?" "What, baby?" "I want to be a lawyer. Like Miss Morrison. I want to help people like us, people who get hurt by people with power. I want to make sure they get justice, too." Tamara joined her daughter at the window, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Your grandfather would be so proud. He built all this because he refused to accept that his skin color should limit him. You're carrying that legacy forward." "We both are," Zuri corrected. "You didn't just inherit his empire. You made it better. You made it mean something." That evening, Tamara hosted a dinner in the hotel's grand ballroom. The entire Iron Brotherhood attended, along with James Wellington, Rebecca Morrison, Judge Sterling, Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Rodriguez, and dozens of hotel employees whose lives had changed because of new policies and protections. Bear stood to offer a toast, his massive frame imposing even in a tailored suit. 10 years ago, I heard a child scream and a mother cry for help. I made a choice that day, to call my brothers, to stand guard, to refuse to let injustice win. We all made that choice. And look what came from it." He raised his glass toward Tamara and Zuri. "You two turned trauma into transformation. You took the worst day of your lives and used it to build something that protects thousands of workers, that gives dignity to service, that proves justice isn't just for the rich and powerful. You are the definition of strength, and we are honored to stand with you. Always. Always." 41 voices echoed. Tamara stood, Zuri beside her, looking at the faces of people who'd become family. "My grandfather used to say that wealth means nothing if you don't use it to lift others. That power means nothing if you don't use it to protect the vulnerable. That success means nothing if you achieve it by stepping on those beneath you." She paused, her voice strong. "We proved him right. Not just with policies or profits, but with the simple truth that every person deserves dignity, every worker deserves respect, every child deserves protection, and when those things are threatened, there will always be people willing to fight back." She raised her glass. "To justice, to family, to the brothers who showed up when it mattered most, and to everyone here who chose courage over comfort, who chose right over easy, who chose to stand up when others looked away." "To justice," the room chorused. The story of Tamara Williams and the Iron Brotherhood became legend in hospitality circles, in social justice movements, in communities where working people fought for dignity. It was taught in business schools as a case study in ethical leadership. It was cited in congressional testimony about labor protections. It was whispered among service workers as proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win. And in Suite 2047 of the Sovereign Grand Hotel, a plaque was mounted on the wall. It didn't mention the assault or the violence or the trauma. It simply read, "This room stands as a reminder that dignity is non-negotiable, that justice is achievable, and that family is defined not by blood, but by who shows up when you need them most." May all who enter here remember that every person deserves respect, regardless of their station. May power never again be used to harm the vulnerable. And may we never forget that sometimes angels wear leather and ride motorcycles. Below it, a single line in smaller text, "In memory of Thomas Williams, who built an empire with dignity. In honor of Tamara and Zuri Williams, who proved that strength comes not from never falling, but from rising every time you're knocked down." If this story moved you, if you believe in justice, in dignity, in the power of community to protect its own, then subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it, because the world needs more people willing to stand up, more communities willing to protect their own, and more proof that money and power don't always win. Sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys get their victory. And that's worth celebrating. That's worth remembering. That's worth fighting for.